Live well, win well. It is on point with Juandolyn Stokes right here on News and Talk. We are WAOK and welcome to Sister Talk. And we're so very glad to have our very special guest with us today. I call her like a woman of faith, a woman of courage, and a bold sister, intelligent and passionate about all things. Tamara Springs. Welcome to On Point. How are you?
I am well. How are you?
I am doing extremely well, and I'm certainly delighted to have you to share with us today. How have you been?
You know, I am blessed. I'm blessed. I am healing, and I am here. So I count that all joy. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. And a lot of times, we as women, just different things that we experience in life. Healing is a process, and you take it one day at a time. You have a new book. You have a book out. And I want you to tell us the reason for you giving it the title that it has.
So my book is entitled "Sordid Injustice," and that title was actually sort of divine. Um, I have a sister that's a creative, and as I was trying to give birth to this book, she was like my doula. And we were talking one day after I had finished it, because it was truly a labor of love and pain and all of that. And I was like, I don't really know what to call this book. And she was like, well, you've got to put something in there with injustice. And we just started playing with words back and forth. And she said, well, sordid is actually an interesting way to describe what happened to you. And I was like,
Mm.
ooh, that's it. So, Sordid Injustice, a memoir of courage, conviction, the misuse of RICO is the whole title. But it really encapsulates what I experienced. It was a sordid form of injustice.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, that title, being assorted injustice. It really does explain, because I have followed this story for years and just concerned about those, names such as yourself that came up and the way things just kind of process its way out. Talk to us about it. I mean, because you're a former Atlanta Public Schools leader, and in this book, you're kind of taking readers deep inside one of the most, how you describe, notorious educational scandals
Mhm.
that have happened in Atlanta. Tell us about it.
Sure. So, I use this story as my platform to kind of shine a bright light in a couple of areas. One, really the misuse of RICO, particularly in our case. For people that don't know, RICO is a law that was created for the mafia, for gangsters, for organized crime. And in this particular case, 35 educators were indicted with allegations that we participated in some coordinated effort of cheating and got big fat bonuses. And that was the narrative that not only went also out across the city of Atlanta and the state of Georgia, it went out across the country. The problem with that narrative is that it was not rooted in facts or data. In fact, the prosecutors at the time, who were lead prosecutors, the DA at the time, was well aware that some of us on trial, first of all, had never even been in close proximity to a test. I was one of those people. I had never been close enough to a test to even be able to identify one. And I certainly, in 8 years of working in Atlanta Public Schools as an executive director, had never received a penny of bonus money. And you couple that with the reality that all of the principals that I personally supervised were cleared in the investigation. None of my principals were ever charged with wrongdoing. There were 3 teachers and 1 test coordinator in my region out of almost 2,000 staff in my region that admitted to changing answers or were, determined to have changed answers or took pleas indicating they changed answers. But their principal was not indicted. I was. And so that's part of what the sordid injustice, definition, is rooted in. How does a person who literally, like, I had never been written up for anything in my life. I was
Yeah.
by the book person. I handled business. I'd made sure children were, taught at high levels and held adults accountable. And that turned me into, I guess, a criminal. I mean, it's kind of crazy when you think about it. But that is the reality of what happened. People who never seen tests, who never got bonus money, were held accountable for people who actually may have done something unethical. And then I was sent to prison. I spent 16 months in prison, most of it in a maximum security prison assigned to the lifers dorm for a crime I never committed. So that's what.
Yeah, that is an injustice, a sordid injustice. Those of you who are listening by radio, we're going to go to break, and we'll be back with more right here on News and Talk, WAOK. Tamara Springs, tell us a little bit more about your role, because you talk about you were never even privy to these tests. You were like an administrator, right? Like an executive director. Tell us about like your role and responsibility like within the school system at that time.
Sure. Yeah. And, it was a role, I held a similar role in my hometown. I actually came from Wichita, Kansas. I was born and raised there, came through the educational system there, and started off as a teacher, became a principal, and I was the area superintendent of elementary schools. And in 2004, the Atlanta Public Schools sent a headhunter to talk to me about coming to Atlanta to replicate some of the work that I had done in Wichita Public Schools. And so I was no stranger to leadership. I was no stranger to supervising principals. In fact, I had more principals that I supervised in Wichita than I ever did in Atlanta. I think I had 63 schools in Wichita. I came to Atlanta, and I think when I came, I had 21 schools that I was the leader for. I supervised all the principals in those schools. I was responsible for opening schools, closing schools, ensuring that instruction was quality. So when you think about like a regional or an area superintendent, even though that's what they call us executive directors, the work was very similar to the work that I had previously done. And my primary role was to train, develop, select, and build the capacity for principals to become really strong instructional leaders. And that's where I spent my time.
Yeah. And when you think about like principals overall in the school system, what is their role and their function? Like these principals that you were training and leading and making sure that they were successful as principals.
So in Atlanta, the primary role of the principal was to be what we call the instructional leader of the school. They were really there to ensure that teachers had what they needed to provide excellent education. They were supposed to be individuals that could go into a classroom, conduct observations, give meaningful feedback to teachers that help them improve their practices. Ultimately, they were held accountable for student results. But the overall school environment, was their responsibility. Like principals were there to make sure it was a safe environment, that, teachers, delivered quality instruction, and that kids came to school and learned every single day. I love being a principal. It was probably one of the hardest jobs I've ever had, because it's like being a principal of a small city. I mean, mayor of a small city, you're in charge of everything, from the cafeteria, to the buses. And so, making sure that we had quality people to fulfill that role was my job. But, principals are kind of the beginning and the end in a school, because if you have quality leaders, then you have a great school. You don't have quality leaders, you don't have a great school.
Yeah. And during that time, overall, with the Atlanta public school system, how would you describe the overall school system when it comes to like the students and the teachers and diversification within APS?
So I will tell you, I came to Atlanta, and I was assigned a region that had opposite ends of the diversity spectrum. I was responsible for all the schools in Buckhead. So I had the wealthiest of children, and I had all the schools in Bankhead. So I had some of the poorest of children, right? And so, across the board, I saw hardworking teachers. I saw teachers who really cared, who really wanted the best for their students, who came and showed up every single day. But that was as a direct result of the work that had been done before me. When I got to Atlanta in 2004, I think the reforms that had been in place to ensure that the quality of teaching was above board, and that teachers were highly professional and highly competent. That work had already started when I got here. So by the time I came in 2004, every school had adopted a comprehensive school reform model. which was of their choosing. And so, my work was really around like elevating the rigor of what was going on, to make sure that students, had a high level instruction in schools. But, I will tell you that, the majority of the teachers that I observed, because I stayed in schools all the time, were really, high impact, caring educators. There were some people that did not fit that mold. And those were the people, unfortunately, that I had to, address. There were some principals that, unfortunately didn't fit that mold. And those were individuals I had to address as well. But by and large, it was a culture of individuals who really expected children to learn and had high expectations and delivered instruction that met those expectations by and large.
Wow, wow, that's good. Those of you listening by radio, welcome back to On Point with Juandolyn Stokes, and the author of "Sordid Injustice," a memoir of courage and conviction and the misuse of RICO in this wonderful memoir. And of course, this former Atlanta Public School leader, Tamara Springs, actually takes readers into and inside of one of the largest educational scandals in this country. When you're saying that, what was the reason, do you believe, behind all of this? The efforts to take down black leaders and a lot of female leaders in the educational system in APS. Was there tension between state and the school?
Yeah, so I don't want to give too much away that's in the
Yeah.
book, but I will tell you that politics is at the center of the entire case. Years ago, Bob Woodward wrote a book, and he said, follow the money, and that is what he said after he wrote the investigative story about Watergate. And if you follow the money in this case, all roads lead to a couple of things. One, Atlanta Public Schools got the largest amount of Title I funding in the state of Georgia. Those were federal funds. In addition to that, the Atlanta Public Schools for decades had controlled a local 1 cent sales tax that was given to the district in the 1970s when they were in deep financial trouble. And the caveat with the award of that 1 cent sales tax was that it could never be revoked. It had to be voluntarily given back by the school district back to the city of Atlanta. And by the time I came here, that 1 cent sales tax was worth billions of dollars. It should not surprise anyone that after Dr. Hall left, the interim superintendent who came at the time, Dr. Earl Davis, was courted for that 1 cent sales tax. He did not give it up, but his successor, when she came in town, I think she was here like 3 months, and she gave it back to the city. And so I think, it's, when you think about, the perfect storm, I mean, you've got a couple of things that happen. One of which, if you read my book, and I didn't know this at the time, but all of the schools where cheating was alleged to have occurred were all on the Beltline. If you've lived in Atlanta any amount of time, you now know what the value of the houses are on the Beltline and the ethnicity of the people who live in those houses. And so, when people want something back, they find ways to take it back. And, what better way than to take a school district that was pretty progressive at the time? I remind people that at one point, I don't remember if the year was 2008 or 2009, somewhere in there, Atlanta Public Schools had the highest number of Gates Millennium Scholars graduating from high schools in the country. We had a double-digit number of Gates Millennium Scholars. No other school district had done that. And I remind people that you don't get a Gates Millennium Scholarship on CRCT scores. You get Gates Millennium Scholarships on ACT and SAT scores. You also had, the NAEP, the National Association of Educational Progress, that flew people in to do assessments to measure academic progress for students all across the country. And Atlanta Public Schools voluntarily participated in something called the TUDA, the Trial Urban District Assessment. And Atlanta Public Schools was named the fastest growing school district in the country by outside people who came and administered those tests to a random sampling of students, hundreds of kids across our district. and they, it wasn't us giving the test. It was people flying in from across the country. So there are so many indicators that Atlanta Public Schools was doing a lot of great things, progressive things for children of color. We were sending kids to college like nobody's business, and they weren't just going to anybody's college. Like, we had kids going to the Posse Foundation, to middle Ivies, to Ivy League schools by the dozens. And I think, history, if you look at history, every time it seems that there is movement in a positive direction for children of color, poor children, somebody determines that shouldn't be happening. And so they find a way to shake it up and disrupt it. But there are definitely political implications for what happened. You can see now as you look, those who are in Atlanta is a charter school district now. Charter schools, cut their teeth in the state of Georgia. And Dr. Hall, rest her soul, she was pro-public education. She was not pro-charter. She was an anti-charter, but she believed that quality public schools needed to be in place because the majority of children attended public schools at the time. But now, that's not the case in the city of Atlanta. So, you couple that with all things, and there's it's in the book that I won't go into, but lots of politics at play in this case. And, that's sort of, again, why the name Sordid Injustice is apropos, because it, when you look at the underlayer, and, I don't withhold anything in this book. I'm very transparent. I have receipts to back up every single thing that I've written. And, the trial transcripts say most of what I'm saying. So, anyone who's questioning, oh, did that really happen? Yeah, go, Google it or go look at the trial transcripts. The reality is that, there were lots of politics at play.
Yeah, and that's what we knew and felt, all the way through this process. And Dr. Hall, at the time was very adamant about public school, and she kept the right team in place of educators and administrators that would ensure, and that's why the scores were so high, the testing, and the students were growing, and also in addition, the finances, because there were companies that Dr. Hall had built relationships with that were investing in these schools as well and these programs. And so, I mean, you're right on point with this. I've got a caller on the line who has a question for you. Deborah, welcome. Tamara Springs is on the line. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Juandolyn. You always bring it. Ms. Spring, well, I'm glad y'all brought up Dr. Hall, so I wanted you to tell the audience a little bit more about her.
Tamara, can you hear our caller?
I cannot.
Okay.
Let me see. Hold on. Can you hear me now?
Okay, now you should be able to hear her. Good.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you, Tamara. I said thank you. Great. I can't wait to read your book, even though I know a lot about the story already. You mentioned the lead prosecutor. That's my ring. I was asking you, could you please give the name of the lead prosecutor on the case?
Sure. So, I had two trials. Paul Howard was the DA at the time, but the lead prosecutor was a woman named Fonnie Willis. And then in the second trial, Fonnie Willis and her partner, I'm sorry, his name escapes me. Just give me a second; it'll come to me. But they were both the lead, co-leads on the case. Clint Rucker was
the names that I was looking for.
Yeah, Fonnie Willis and Clint Rucker.
Gave me the name, and Paul Howard. People, that's so important, because I'm not going to tell the book either, but I want you to look up those two names. Basically, when you think about a RICO charge, when you think about teachers, when you think about Black teachers, when you think about where she said where the city of Atlanta was in reference to our education of our students, when you look at it today and you see people that are running for governor, and what the main thing that they're talking about is this horrible education system in the state of Georgia. So it was so relevant as to what she's talking about now, as to putting those RICO charges on those Black students, on those Black parents, on those Black teachers, on the city of Atlanta, on the state of Georgia, and passing that information around the world. And the reason I wanted you to know who the lead prosecutors was, because that's important. That's so important when you look at who we are, when you talk about the Black Mecca, when you talk about the city of Atlanta and the state of Georgia. And I tell people all the time, I trust no one. I walk alone. I have people I have love and people that I follow, but I trust no one until I feel that I can trust those individuals. If you could talk about Dr. Hall, because I don't know people, that they know how she died or how she felt when, with her passing and things like that. I think that's important. If you could talk about how the RICO charge affected a lot of teachers, and then if you can talk about where we are today with teachers still quitting, and even today they're saying that it's the worst system. And when we have people that are running for the governor of the state of Georgia now, they're still talking about the horrible education system of the state of Georgia.
So I can tell you that, I don't think it's any secret, Dr. Hall, at the time she was indicted, she had stage 4 cancer. It was not her first bout with cancer. I believe she was a very private person, but when I came to Atlanta in 2004, she was not around for several months. I later learned that she was battling a form of cancer at that point in 2004, 2005. And then I think it came back. And so this charging, of felony charges, when we turned ourselves into Fulton County Jail with those, her bond was, I think, $7.5 million. My bond was over $4 million, along with my colleagues. Most of the principals and teachers had $1 million bonds. She was sick. Like, you could look at her and tell she was sick. And they knew that. And, I remember hearing Fannie Willis, kind of laugh when my attorney was, having kind of a sidebar with her. Beverly Hall has cancer. Y'all gonna really send a lady to cancer to prison? And she laughed and said, I knew she had cancer when I indicted her. And I remember thinking, how cold and how callous do you have to be? And even, if you watch some of the trial, there was a suggestion that she be tried via Skype, right? And I remember doing an interview saying, what kind of person thinks it's okay to try somebody from a hospital bed via Skype during trial? Just a lack of humanity. And I have no doubt, that what she went through took her out. She's not the only person. We lost several educators that, and I will say their names. I write about them in my book. Dr. Rosemary Hamer was an excellent educator. When the investigation started, it took her out. Dr. Willie Davenport, same thing, excellent educator, phenomenal principal. Before, we could even get to the trial, she'd been indicted and charged. Cancer took her out. I mean, it took a toll on everyone's, mental, physical health, financial health. Everything we went through was designed, I think, to destroy us. And some people just didn't make it out alive on the other side. Some of us barely made it, but some people didn't make it at all. With regard to the current state of affairs, I regret to inform you, I don't track it. I can't watch a house that I helped to build burn. So I just don't follow what happens in education. I do know that it's a charter district. I know that the scores are horrible again. I also know that there is silence around that. Like, people there was all this uproar when kids were achieving because they said it was impossible. But now that the schools are back where I guess people believe they belong, there is silence in the city again. And so I don't have anything to really say about that. I believe that, there were strong educators who believed in kids and really moved mountains to make sure kids had what they need. And they thanked us by putting us in jail and in prison. And so I don't really follow it. It's just too painful for me to watch. I'm sorry, even as I do this interview, like, it's like watching your whole house burn up. And
Juandolyn.
Yes.
I just wanted to tell people again, closed mouths get fed in Georgia.
I hear you. Thanks, Deborah, for calling.
So much. Great show.
Yeah, stay healthy. Thank you. Stay connected. Stay on point. It's On Point with Juandolyn Stokes, News and Talk, WAOK. As we're talking here, the weight and the heaviness of things that can affect us mentally and emotionally and financially. Tamara Springs, how has your faith, family, and friends helped you through this whole journey?
Wow. So I'll take those in the order that you asked. First, my faith, actually, that is probably the biggest testimony that I have, because it was really tested on this journey. I have always been a servant of the Most High. At the time when I was indicted, I was married to a minister. I was a Sunday school teacher. I led the children's choir at church. I went to church every Sunday. I paid my tithes, and I really felt like, God he was pleased with me. And so when this happened to me, I was first of all in shock because I couldn't even believe it was happening. Then I was angry. And then I couldn't understand like why God would allow me to suffer so much when he knew the truth. Like he's omnipotent, right? He knew what I was dealing with wasn't even, a part of, my character, my integrity. And so for a while, I broke up with God. I did. When I was sitting in that prison cell and, eating food that wasn't even fit for human consumption and, sick, I really felt abandoned by God. But what I found on the other side is that he was really faithful the whole time. Even when I wanted to give up, like he would not let me go. And I think that's part of like what my story is now. Because I probably, in fact, I would not have survived had he not kept me. I absolutely would not have made it out of prison alive had he not kept me. So I will tell you, my faith was actually strengthened, but it had to go through. Like I was looking at God kind of cross-eyed and, with one eyebrow raised, because I was like, wait, I'm your child, and you say you love me, and you let these people just messing my whole life up. In terms of my family, I have one son that I gave birth to, and right before I was indicted, like 2 days before my son was diagnosed, he was a freshman in college, was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And I was out on bond until the appeal process ended. The Supreme Court refused to hear my case. And so when I was told on October the 1st that they had declined to hear my case, and I had to report to prison on October the 8th or 9th, I think it must have been the 9th, because I had 8 days to prepare to put my whole life in order. And so my son, who at the time was 25, went to go live with my parents. Long story short, he had an altercation with my dad, and he ended up in trouble with the law, with some domestic violence charges with my father, which my father, had dropped. But he got caught up in a system with a legal guardian who refuses now to give him back, and tells, the courts that I'm a convicted felon and a horrible mother, that I abandoned my son and didn't care for him. When I was sent to prison, I didn't abandon my son, but I've been fighting for 6 years to get him home. I've been home 5 years. He's been in there 6 years. And, I can get him home, as the lawyer told me about a year ago, for $20,000. That's why I wrote this book. I'm trying to raise the funds to get my son back home so that he can come out of a hospital that's really not helping him much. So that he could get the treatment that he got when he was here in Atlanta. Because it really, people don't realize when you send a person to prison, you disrupt the family, right? Parents lose their children, mothers lose their children, fathers lose access to their children, and you have to fight another system to reunite your family when you come home. And so that's the battle that I have been involved in since January 2nd, 2020. The day I came home, I have not stopped fighting. I've not stopped going to see him because he deserves to come out of that place, but he's trapped in another system. And in terms of my family and my friends, when you go through something like this traumatic, this is public, you really do find out like who's got your back. You find out what people think of you. You find out where you stand with people. It is my family and my friends, who supported me financially. I lost everything. Every penny that I had went to pay for lawyers. So, I have no retirement. I have no life savings anymore. It's all gone. I lost my home. I lost my car. I just about lost my mind. But, I'm here today, because of people who love me. And like, I write about this in the book. My principals and my staff paid my bond to come home from jail, pretty much except for, I think, $270. When I turned myself into the Fulton County jail at the lawyer's office to go to jail, they were lined up to pay my bond. So, had people not just blessed me, like when I went to prison, one of my friends made sure that another friend paid my car payment every month so my car wouldn't get repossessed. One of my friends took over my storage because I had to throw all my things in storage because I lost my house. Another one of my friends paid my life insurance policy because I'm older and I didn't have a job, and, I didn't want to lose my life insurance policy. So when I tell you, people just kind of stepped up and blessed me in ways that, principals put money on my books. The whole time I was in prison, I never needed anything because they saw about me. And I'm really grateful for that. Like I probably, like I said, I wouldn't have made it for a number of reasons, but, I was blessed to walk out of prison and walk into a job, that had been held for me. 2 weeks, I came home, I got into therapy, I rested for a couple of weeks, tried to get my son back, didn't realize how hard it was going to be. And then I went to work for, a nonprofit. And so, all those things just kind of helped to try to rebuild everything I had lost. I'm still in a rebuilding phase, even 5 years later. But, I would not have made it without, the support of my family, my friends, my parents. People prayed for me. I still run into people. I was at a wedding on Saturday, and this teacher was in the elevator. She's one of my former teachers. And she looked at me and I was like, I know you. And she said, I know you. And she kind of looked, because I look very different now. My hair is very different. I gained a little weight. And so she said, what's your name? And I said, well, it was Tamara Cotman. But now, and before I could get it out, she jumped across the elevator, grabbed me, and just started crying. And she's like, I prayed for you. Oh my God, I prayed for you. And then she looked at me, she said, ooh, you look good. You don't look like what you've been through. I was like, yeah, I guess not, but the reality is, a lot of people covered me. And I still see people, run into people, meet people who, have told me how much they prayed for me and all of us while we were going through that horrific time in our lives.
Yeah. We're talking with Tamara Springs, the author of Sordid Injustice, a memoir of courage, conviction, and the misuse of RICO ebook. And you've got to get a copy of this book, because you're going to find courage, strength, along with the story that she tells about that would happen to her in this educational scandal. How would you overall describe, Tamara, the injustice that was done to you and others?
Well, I would say that the injustice that was done to me and others is more common than people realize. I think the greatest injustice, and I say this, with love toward my colleagues, is, the injustice where people are forced to sign plea deals to be free, right? A lot of the people in this case got scared and took plea deals, having done nothing wrong, but they took the plea deal because, they were scared. Or people take plea deals because they want to go back to work. They don't want to, go to jail. And plea deals, I think, as my attorney once told me, plea deals are for people who are guilty. If you've done something wrong, it's a great opportunity to not have to serve as much time. But I think, when we have a legal system that rewards, perjury, because that's what, that's one of the reasons I could not sign a plea deal. I would have perjured myself. I had no principles. Everybody I supervised was cleared. So for me to sign a plea deal and say, I'm guilty of cheating, I did these things, I would have had to lie on myself. And I just wasn't willing to do that. But I know people that had to do that in their mind. They felt like they didn't have a choice because the consequences for not signing the plea deal were so great. And so I think that is the highest level of injustice, that a criminal legal system, or a quote unquote justice system, I call it an injustice system, counts wins by any means necessary, right? That's, they accused us of getting, test scores by any means necessary, but they count wins by any means necessary. And even if, you have to tell a lie to get them a win, they're okay with that. I think, charging people with RICO, like, I believe sincerely, and I said this in my GBI interviews, people who cheated should have been held accountable. Like, that is a ethical issue. Yeah. They should have been taken to the Professional Standards Commission. They should have, had been disciplined, been suspended, been fired. But I just think it's absolutely outrageous that anybody would have thought that it was acceptable to send educators to prison. Like, what did they possibly think would come of that? I think that, as a society, we have to come to terms with the purpose of prisons. And I've said this in, in other interviews. I'm not an abolitionist. I'm sorry, I'm not. My brother was murdered. Like, I believe that there are certain people who probably should not be in the same sandbox with other people. Like if you
Yeah.
boil another human being and eat them, I don't want you in the sandbox with my family, because nothing good comes out of prison. Everything horrible that I know about in this world, I learned in prison. There are things I should never have known as a lifetime educator. You know, I have multiple degrees, very learned, and I know things that I should never know because I was exposed to those things or I witnessed those things in prison. And, you know, I don't think that that's what the purpose of prison is. People shouldn't be going there and shown how to do horrible things. And, you know, it's just malicious. And so, you know, how do I feel about, you know, what happened? And I think there's lots of societal issues we have to grapple with that this case hopefully will shine a bright light on. But more than anything, I hope that it really challenges, you know, how people view charging and overcharging and RICO. Like RICO seems to be the flavor in Atlanta right now. Everybody can get a RICO. Like they're after the protesters out here, you know, against Cop City getting RICO, rappers getting RICO. I mean, it's like the cloak they want to put on everybody because it's an easy way to sweep up individuals, you know, guilty or not, and hold people accountable for things that they haven't done.
Yeah, you're right. On point with Juandolyn Stokes. We're going to break those listening by radio, and we'll be back with more. Tamara Springs, tell us about, you know, why did they give you 16 months, and why were you released after 16 months? You know, just overall.
So I just want to clarify. They didn't give me 16 months. They gave me 20 years.
They gave you 20 years.
Yes,
oh my God.
My original sentence was 20 years. Mine and my two colleagues, Michael Pitts and Sharon Davis Williams, all got 20 years because at that point, Dr. Hall had passed away. We were the highest ranking individuals. And as you know, some of the jurors understand saying, well, you know, somebody had to pay. Well, it would have been nice if people who actually had the bill paid, but they gave it to us. Because I filed an appeal first, I went through the process early, and my lawyer, as we were being sentenced, attempted to tell the judge that he was using the wrong sentencing guidelines because he gave us the sentencing for RICO, but we were actually convicted of conspiracy to commit RICO, even though there was never a conspiracy proven in court on any day. And so that carried a maximum sentence of 10 years. So about 2 weeks after we were sentenced, the judge brought the three of us back and reduced our sentence from 20 years to 10 years. He said it was because he had a change of heart, but the reality is it was an appealable decision. And so he wanted to make it difficult for us to win on appeal. So he changed it himself. Of the 10 years, I was sentenced to serve 3 in prison and 7 on probation. When I first attempted to be paroled, because you're eligible in Georgia for parole after you have served 1/3 of your sentence. So after I had served a year, my parole packet was submitted, but the parole board denied me. Someone who had access to the information told me that I had a single-digit release score, which was lower than some people that had committed murder. And I still have a letter where they told me that I was going to be serving all 3 years of that sentence. And I remember getting that letter from my counselor and just falling on like I passed out. I fell onto the floor. I don't remember when what happened, but I couldn't believe that I wasn't coming home because I'd gone to prison with another person, one teacher. She wasn't one of my teachers, but one of the other teachers in the case had been able to come home at 1/3 of her sentence. So she had 2 years, 24 months, and at 8 months, they released her. And I was just sure I was coming home, but somebody did not want me to come home. And so when I got that letter that I was going to be there the full 3 years, at that point, I'd had a couple of health issues in prison. My kidneys, failed shortly thereafter. Like it was just, I had all kind of problems. And I thought I was going to be there. And that December, I got called to the counselor, and she looked at me kind of nonchalant and put a piece of paper in front of me and said, you see that you're going home. And I was like, I didn't even believe it. I didn't believe it. I wouldn't tell anybody I was going home. I kept that a secret until the day before I was released because I didn't want anybody to mess it up. And so I came home. I was the only person released on January 2nd, 2020.
Wow. Such an amazing story. How have you been able to do self-care after coming home, doing
Yeah. So
self-care and taking care of yourself?
So one of the first things I did was get into therapy. I spent a full year in therapy when I came home because prison is designed, like I said, to destroy all aspects of your well-being, and particularly your mental health. And so I spent a full year in therapy. And I've always kind of like done things to help myself, but I was in such a fragile state. Like I still don't. I'm not comfortable going out in public. Like I'm kind of a recluse, but not really. But
Okay.
when I go out, I usually take my husband with me. Um, I just I do a few things to bring me peace. We kind of travel a little bit. We go like to water somewhere. If we can get away to Florida, water brings me peace. And so I take care of like my mental health by spending time in safe places. I don't put myself in positions where I'm going to be out in a place where people may try to harm me, because I'm very distrustful of people now. I
Okay.
think it's mostly what I've experienced. I really prefer little children, elderly people, and animals.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I just surround myself with like joy, and I protect my peace. I have a phone number that's very difficult to obtain. I don't give it out. I have relatives that don't have my direct phone number anymore. I don't, I want to limit access to me in some ways, because I don't want to be available. So much of my life was public for so long. I relish in like the private moments that I have. And so, I between therapy, my faith has also helped to, sustain me. I'm still working on my healing, as I said earlier, but I do things that bring me joy. A pedicure brings me joy.
Yes.
Being able to floss my teeth brings me joy, because I couldn't get
Yes.
dental floss in prison, right? So, I find joy in the little things that, I didn't used to take time to smell the flowers because I was a workaholic. And now I work 9 to 5. That's
Yeah.
what I do.
That's good. That's good. And it's important that we take good care of ourselves. What do you want people overall, just overall, to take away from reading your book?
Well, I want people to take away a couple of things. I think the most important thing is, people should really understand that this RICO thing is dangerous. Like anybody, if you are a leader in any capacity, and the people that, work in your organization, whether you know them or not, whether you have direct relationship with them or not, and they do something, criminal, you could be held accountable for that, which is crazy. Like when you think, and I give this example, I did an interview a couple of months ago, and I have an example. If you were eating in a restaurant and somebody was across from you eating their food, and they got up and walked out and they didn't pay, and they had eaten, $280 worth of steak and lobster, and the management of the restaurant came and told you you had to pay for their food because you knew or should have known they were going to leave without paying. That is what happened in our case. Like they said, well, you knew or should have known cheating was taking place. What? And so
Right.
understanding how dangerous this charge is, and how it could be applied to you in your life, you in your work. I also think people should pay attention to who you put in office, right? Elected officials have, particularly DAs, have a lot of power, and who they determine who gets charged and what the charges are. That's not something that's done for them. They determine who should be charged and what charges. And when you have elected officials that literally trump up charges, manufacture evidence, blatantly lie, and allow other people to lie in court, that's dangerous. And so I would tell people just to be thoughtful about, the character of the people that you vote for. When people have questionable character in their personal lives, they're going to have questionable character in their professional lives. And, you should just be really thoughtful. I'm unable to vote. I have a felony on my record until somebody comes along and looks at this case and says, wait a minute, this isn't right. I'm prayerful that, our case will be looked at like the Central Park 5 case was looked at. And
Yeah.
eventually, justice was served 14 years later. Well, I'm coming up on, 12 years. So, I'm really hoping that at some point, somebody peels back the layers of the onion in this case and realizes that what happened to us never should have happened. But mostly I want people to walk away understanding that if you don't speak up about things, you can look at what's happening in the world. And this is not a political statement. It's a factual statement. The more silent you are about injustice, the more likely injustice is to occur again and again and again. And I think if people had stood up and said, hey, wait a minute, what are y'all doing with these educators? Maybe the outcome would have been different. But by and large, the city kind of remained silent until it was too late. I appreciate the people that marched in the streets after we were convicted, but by then we were convicted, right?
Right.
And so, when you see something, you need to say something. If stuff isn't right, things aren't right, they don't look like, justice, then, you should call out what you see. And it's not personal. It is, what we should be doing when we see something wrong. It's happening all over the country right now. Injustice reigns supreme because people have been silent. So
yeah. And so there is a power in speaking up, and there's a power in voting and making sure that you elect the right officials and put the right individuals in office.
Absolutely.
That walk with integrity, and professionalism. When you hear about the possible closing of 17 schools currently in the Atlanta public school systems, what comes to mind when you hear about that possibility of 17 schools closing because of low enrollment?
Well, I think it's just a direct reflection of what happens when you let schools fail. People don't send their children voluntarily to poor performing schools. They choose private, they choose other kinds of educational services because they don't want their children to go to a school that's labeled as failing. I think it's a correlation between, what happens when you let schools go. Again, I didn't even know the number. I saw something that came across my phone the other day that there was community meetings, and I've had my share of community meetings about the future of schools, but that's an awful lot of schools. But that tells me that the enrollment is not where it needs to be. And is that because people aren't having more babies, or people not, sending their children to public school? I don't know what the data around that is, but I think it's symbolic of how people feel about the quality of what's being offered to them.
Yeah. I agree. I appreciate you so much for coming and sharing with us today. We have a friend in common. That's my sister girl, Dr. 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 Rouse Dama.
Oh my
And
goodness!
we went to grad school together. We are great friends. And so she made sure that we connected. And so I appreciate her, and I appreciate you. Tell our audience again the name of your book and where they can go to purchase it, or to the publisher or website or social media pages.
Well, first of all, let me thank you by having me on the show. I am so honored and humbled. Dr. Ross was one of the first people to buy the book. Actually, she downloaded it on Kindle the day after it came out.
Wow.
And so
Awesome.
I'm grateful to you and to her for this opportunity. You can go to Amazon directly and look up Sordid Injustice by Tamara Cotman Springs. You can go to my website, courageouslyshe.com. And there's a link there to purchase the book. I am open. I do book signings. I now publicly speak about this case. I will come to your church, your Women's Day. I'll do. You have a book club you want me to come and speak to? I'm open. You just have to go to my website, courageouslyshe.com, and submit a request. I'm booking for 2026, and I have another book that I'm working on. It will come out. This book came out Juneteenth of this year. Did I pick that date intentionally? I did.
Good.
The next book comes out Juneteenth of next year, and that book really, I think it's better than the first one because it talks about how I survived prison, and it is really focus
Wow.
on both my faith, but also the cruelties of the carceral system and how I survived that barely. And I'm very, 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 very transparent in that book. Um, so I'm really excited about that one. It will come out. So, over the next year, I will be booking, book tours and, speaking tours. So, reach out to me and thank you again for promoting this book, for bringing me on to talk about it, and for allowing me to tell my story. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Well, you're more than welcome, and we're grateful for you. And we'll be in touch. We'll be in touch through our sister girl. Have a great one now, and thanks a lot.
You too. Thank you so
That's
much.
right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a great one. That's Tamara Springs on point with Juandolyn Stokes, News and Talk. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Listen, our executive producer, Chantel, thank you so very much. And to all of you for listening, we'll be back tomorrow, 10 a.m. until 1 p.m. right here on News and Talk, WAOK. This is your friend and sister, Juandolyn Stokes. Have